Hi there, this is John Drew from Elevated Planet, bringing you the second ever episode of The Twiglet Zone. Mysteries of the Pyramids Part 2, The Invisibility Conundrum. The Twiglet Zone is not just where I pause to enjoy a savoury snack. It is where I introduce you to fantastical stories that are designed to test the boundaries of your beliefs. How hard you choose to cling to the safety net of your beliefs is for you to decide. Just remember that wherever you go in this world or beyond, versions of reality differ greatly. Ask yourself, what makes your version of reality the right one? Welcome to the Twiglet Zone. I've created a written version of this episode, and it is from this that I shall now read. In part 1, I told you how levitation, through a balance of psychic energy and sound energy, was used not just to levitate stones of the Egyptian pyramids into place, but also to cut and quarry the stones from their point of origin. All this was carried out by highly trained priests who had this knowledge passed down from previous civilizations, which is knowledge and wisdom which has largely been lost to us in the modern era. One of the things I mentioned was how sound energy could be used to render something invisible, much like Harry Potter's cloak of invisibility. And from the feedback I received from last week's episode, this clearly warrants a deeper explanation. So here it is. And once you've mastered it, maybe you can use it in a stealthy way to keep an eye on the kids. So, as we all know, it's scientifically understood that everything in the known universe consists of energy, vibrating at certain frequencies, which also includes us. Our physical bodies have 5 senses, being the sense of touch, taste, sight, smell, and hearing. Our senses have preset limitations based on the relatively narrow vibrational spectrum available to us when we are in physical form. So we have a vibrational spectrum within which these senses are active, but outside of which we do not perceive things. This is easily explained using Nala, our beautiful German Shepherd dog, as an example. If I were to blow on a dog whistle, Nala would hear it, but I would not. This is because the whistle operates at a frequency which is beyond the limited range of our human senses, though clearly it falls within the bounds of the canine senses, so we know the sound does truly exist. We also know that Nala's sense of smell is somewhere between 1,000 and 10 million times more sensitive than that of a human being. So the spectrum experienced by dogs is off the scale more impressive than ours. So Nala smells things that we don't. So not only is she adorable, but she's also very clever. As a sidebar, it's also true that animals have significantly better developed psychic senses than humans. When the tsunami struck Indonesia in 2004, it killed over 200,000 people, but very few wild animals, who had all moved to higher ground in advance of the deluge. So this limited range of our human senses also applies to our spectrum of vision. So just because we can't see it doesn't mean that it isn't there. Believe me, there is a vast spectrum of frequencies of colors and light that is not visible to us. This is easy to prove if we pause to think of radio waves and satellite signals. They constantly sweep across our field of vision, but because of the frequency at which they exist, they are invisible to us. If we possessed a broad spectrum of vision, we would literally be able to see them. So when we take this limited human spectrum of senses to its natural conclusion, it's clear that there could be an entire world out there that sits beyond our ability to sense it, and indeed it does. Those who wish to remain invisible only need to know the edge of our limitation of our senses and remain just the other side of it. Interestingly, there are those of us on the planet who are able to act as a bridge between these higher realms and our own. My business partner, Joe Lay, is an exceptionally gifted example of this very thing. Anyway, coming back full circle to how these human senses could facilitate the ability of someone or something to become invisible, it is by the manipulation of energies to raise the frequency just beyond the narrow spectrum of our senses. How could this be achieved in practical terms? Well, as stated previously in the Twiglet Zone, it all comes down to harmonics, the natural method of finding the mathematical equation that makes any one object tick. Then by manipulating these energies to raise the frequency of the object beyond our spectrum, we can render the visible invisible, or do a whole heap of other things for that matter. There are two examples that I'm aware of entire communities that elevated their understanding of these things, such that they were able to transcend to a higher vibrational level and they simply disappeared. There was a Native American tribe that achieved this. They lived their lives in harmony with the natural world around them and had a deep understanding and knowledge of the spiritual realms, much like many shaman in the world today. The tribe worked together as a community through the extraordinary power of group consciousness to transcend the physical plane as we know it. They did not die, there were no bodies, they simply disappeared from our lower vibrational field of existence, moving literally to a higher place. No one knew where they'd gone, they just knew they used to exist and then they didn't. The Mayan civilization did much the same thing, and in saying that, I've just answered a question that has puzzled mankind since 1441. So you can all stop your often misaligned hypothesizing now, because you now know the answer. And there concludes episode 2 of the Twiglet Zone. But I ask you just one more thing. After listening to these seemingly tall tales, I do not ask you to think whether you believe them to be true, but whether you feel them to be true. This is an important distinction. The thinking mind is defensive, as it's where the ego resides. It does not want you to make a fool of yourself by opening your mind to alternate realities. If, however, for a while you're able to turn down the volume of the noise of life, then you will provide yourself an opportunity to deeply relax and feel a response instead. Buddha said, "Quiet the mind and the soul will speak." Your soul is ageless and wise beyond the realms of mortal comprehension. It speaks to us through feelings that often reside in the gut or through our heart-based consciousness. Once you have had time to reflect, I encourage you to respond with a score between 1 to 5 on the Twiglet Zone Deluded-ometer. The higher the score, the more you are expressing the story to be deluded nonsense. As you know, for my part, I believe these stories to be true. This will lead you to the obvious question, how could he possibly claim to know these things? The left hemisphere of the brain demands logic and proof to override the programming we have accepted as our reality. In response, I will tell you that my extensive studies have revealed two vital things when presenting these factual stories. The first vital thing that I have learned is to always leave your audience wanting more. I truly hope that you have enjoyed this episode of The Twiglet Zone.